Beneath the desert of eastern Utah lies an energy resource so large that its estimated size is measured in hundreds of billions of barrels. The richest layers can stretch for more than 100 feet, continuing beneath plateaus, valleys, and federal land across the Uinta Basin. Geologists know where it is. Companies have studied it for decades, and engineers already understand the basic process required to turn it into fuel. Yet Utah has never produced this resource commercially. Not because the deposits are too small, not because they are completely unknown, and not because drilling technology cannot reach them. The real barrier is something far more fundamental, because what Utah possesses underground is often described as oil. But before anyone can use it, they must first finish a geological process that nature never completed. And after nearly a century of attempts, no company has proven that it can do that reliably, economically, and at enormous scale. Utah is sitting on one of the world's largest unconventional oil resources, but it still cannot unlock it. The resource lies primarily inside the Green River Formation of northeastern Utah. According to the Utah Geological Survey, the state contains more than 300 billion barrels of estimated in-ground oil shale resource. The wider Uinta Basin, which extends into western Colorado, has been assessed by the United States Geological Survey at approximately 1.32 trillion barrels in place. That larger figure includes rock of different thicknesses and grades across the entire basin. It does not mean that 1.32 trillion barrels can be commercially produced, but even Utah's smaller state-level estimate is extraordinary. For comparison, a conventional oil field becomes globally important with only a fraction of that amount. And some of Utah's richest oil shale intervals can exceed 130 feet in thickness and theoretically yield more than 25 gallons of oil from each ton of rock. On paper, the scale appears almost impossible to ignore, but there is a reason these numbers are described as resources rather than proven oil reserves. And that difference is where the real story begins. Approximately 50 million years ago, this desert looked completely different. Much of the modern Uinta Basin was covered by Lake Uinta, part of an ancient lake system that occupied sections of what are now Utah and Colorado. Microscopic organisms and algae lived near the surface of the water. When they died, their organic remains sank into the lake and mixed with fine sediment. In deeper areas, water circulation was limited. Organic material accumulated faster than it could completely decay. Over enormous spans of time, layer after layer was buried and compressed into the rocks of the Green River Formation. This process created some of the thickest and richest oil shale deposits known anywhere on Earth. But something important did not happen. The organic-rich rock remained relatively close to the surface. It was buried, but in many places it was never buried deeply enough to experience the natural heat and pressure that normally transform organic material into liquid petroleum. The ingredients were present. The geological process had started, but nature stopped before producing the final product. And that means Utah's giant oil resource is not what its name suggests. Despite the name, oil shale does not normally contain large quantities of liquid crude oil. Instead, the rock contains a solid organic substance called kerogen. Kerogen is a petroleum precursor. If the rock had been buried more deeply for millions of additional years, natural heat might eventually have converted much of it into oil and gas. But because that transformation never occurred, extracting Utah's resource requires engineers to complete the process artificially. The rock must be heated to approximately 450 to 500 degrees Celsius. At those temperatures, the kerogen breaks down and releases an oil-like liquid that can be collected, upgraded, and refined. So Utah is not simply sitting above a giant conventional reservoir, waiting for wells to release it. It is sitting above unfinished petroleum. That distinction explains why horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, the technologies that unlocked shale oil elsewhere in America, do not automatically solve this problem. Fracking releases oil that already exists inside low permeability rock. Utah's oil shale requires companies to manufacture the oil from solid organic material first, and heating billions of tons of rock is where the apparently limitless resource meets its first major obstacle. There are two basic ways companies have attempted to produce oil from shale. The first is mining. Shallow deposits can be excavated, crushed, and transported into a processing facility known as a retort. Inside the retort, the rock is heated until the kerogen releases oil and gas. The oil is collected, but the process leaves behind an enormous volume of heated, chemically altered waste rock that must be cooled, transported, and stored or returned to the mine. The second approach avoids moving all the rock. Instead, companies drill heaters into the deposit and gradually heat the shale underground. Over time, the kerogen converts into liquid hydrocarbons, which can then be pumped through separate production wells. This is known as in situ extraction. In theory, it reduces surface mining and eliminates the need to transport every ton of shale through a retort. But the word gradually hides an enormous challenge. Large underground sections may need sustained heating over long periods before meaningful quantities of oil begin to flow. That requires energy, infrastructure, and capital before the first commercial barrel is produced. And the larger the project becomes, the larger those requirements become with it. The resource may be concentrated underground. The costs are concentrated above. At first, the heating requirement sounds like a straightforward engineering problem. Build enough heaters, supply enough electricity, and collect the resulting oil. But oil is valuable because it contains energy. If an extraction process consumes too much energy before producing a usable barrel, the resource begins to defeat its own purpose. Electricity or fuel must power the heaters. Additional energy is needed to mine or drill, crush and transport rock, operate pumps, upgrade the resulting hydrocarbons, and eventually reclaim the site. The system must produce enough valuable oil to pay for all of those steps and still deliver an acceptable financial return. That calculation becomes especially dangerous when conventional oil prices fall. A project designed when crude is extremely expensive may become uneconomic before its facilities are completed. This is not a theoretical concern. After the oil price shocks of the 1970s, the United States encouraged major investment in Western oil shale. Companies committed billions of dollars to projects and expected expensive conventional oil to make unconventional production competitive. But when long-term oil prices failed to follow the expected path, projects closed. The geology had not changed. The economics had. And that cycle, high prices creating excitement, followed by lower prices destroying the business case, has followed oil shale for generations. Even rich oil shale contains far more rock than petroleum. An interval yielding 25 gallons per ton would require processing well over 1 ton of shale to create a single 42-gallon barrel of oil. Lower-grade deposits would require even more. Now multiply that by a commercial operation producing tens of thousands of barrels every day. The project would not behave like a traditional oil field, where liquid hydrocarbons flow through wells from a reservoir. A mining-based project would behave partly like an enormous mineral operation. Rock would be removed, crushed, heated, and managed continuously. Roads, processing plants, storage facilities, pipelines, and power generation would need to be constructed in a remote region. And after heating, the spent shale would not disappear. Some processed rock can expand, meaning it may occupy more space than it did before mining. The scale of the resource therefore creates a paradox. The deposits are attractive because they are enormous, but extracting even a small percentage of them would require an industrial system that is enormous as well. And then that system would need something already under pressure throughout the American West: water. Commercial oil shale production could require water at several stages. Mining and construction create dust. Processing equipment needs cooling. Oil may require upgrading. Facilities require power. Disturbed land must eventually be reclaimed, and underground operations can interact with aquifers that companies would need to protect from contamination. The precise amount of water required remains uncertain, because different extraction technologies have never operated commercially at full scale in Utah. A review by the Government Accountability Office found estimates ranging from roughly 1 to 12 barrels of water for every barrel of oil produced by in situ methods. For mining and surface retorting, reviewed estimates generally ranged from approximately 2 to 4 barrels of water per barrel of oil. Those figures vary widely and should not be treated as one fixed requirement, but they reveal the size of the concern. The Uinta Basin is an arid region where water already supports communities, agriculture, ecosystems, and existing energy production. A small demonstration project may find enough water. A permanent industry producing hundreds of thousands of barrels per day would create an entirely different calculation. And water is not simply needed for production. Officials would also need to understand how heating, mining, and waste handling could affect groundwater and connected surface supplies. In Utah, the resource is enormous. The surrounding water supply is not. A large portion of the western United States oil shale deposits lies beneath federally managed land. That makes development more than a technical agreement between an energy company and private landowners. Federal agencies must consider leasing, environmental review, wildlife habitat, groundwater, air quality, and reclamation. Following the Energy Policy Act of 2005, the Bureau of Land Management created a research, demonstration, and development program intended to test new oil shale technologies. One of the first leases was issued in Utah to Oil Shale Exploration Company. The idea was to begin with small research tracks and allow expansion only after companies demonstrated progress toward commercially viable production and met federal requirements. But research leases are not commercial industries. They prove that a company can test a method on a limited site. They do not prove that the method can produce large volumes for decades while remaining profitable and environmentally manageable. This is why Utah's deposit has remained trapped between two very different categories. It is far too large to dismiss as a geological curiosity, but it remains far too uncertain to classify as an established oil reserve. The figure of more than 300 billion barrels describes oil that could theoretically be generated from Utah's Karajan-bearing rock. It does not describe the amount a commercial industry could necessarily recover. Some deposits are too lean. Others may be too deeply buried for mining or too shallow for certain underground heating methods. Some lie beneath land where access or environmental impacts create additional barriers, and all of them depend on an extraction technology, oil price, and operating cost that can survive for decades. In an earlier Utah Geological Survey analysis, researchers applied assumptions involving grade, thickness, depth, and land access to create a more constrained estimate. That exercise identified approximately 77 billion barrels under the selected conditions. But researchers emphasized that these restrictions were partly subjective because a proven commercial oil shale technology did not yet exist. Even the smaller number was not a reserve. It was an attempt to determine which part of a gigantic geological resource might someday deserve serious attention. And that leads to the final reason Utah still cannot unlock it. There is no single barrier waiting for one invention to remove it. Utah's oil shale remains underground because every potential solution creates another cost. Mining solves the problem of heating the rock underground, but requires moving and processing enormous quantities of material. In situ extraction leaves the rock in place, but demands prolonged underground heating and careful groundwater protection. Higher oil prices can make the economics look promising, but they can fall before a multi-billion-dollar project begins producing. New technology may reduce water, waste, or energy requirements, but it must still operate reliably at a scale no Utah project has commercially demonstrated. This is the catch hidden inside the title. Utah can reach the rock, it can mine it, it can drill into it, and it can heat small quantities until they release oil. What Utah still cannot do is combine all of those steps into a system that produces petroleum cheaply enough, cleanly enough, and consistently enough to compete with oil that nature has already created. The state is not sitting on a conventional oil field. It is sitting on the raw material for one. More than 300 billion barrels may exist there in theory, but until a company can manufacture those barrels without consuming too much energy, water, land, and money, the number remains geological potential, not usable supply. Utah's resource has been waiting for approximately 50 million years, and despite everything modern engineering can do, the final step may still be the hardest one.